Ես Անդորի մոտ եմ հրավիրում ընտրական համակարգերի միջազգային կենտրոնի հայաստանյան գրասենյակի ղեկավար Միսյո Ջերոմ Լեղոին, ով կներկայացնի իր կազմակերպության հետազոտությունը Հայաստանի օրենսդրության հետ կապված եւ հետո կունենանք վերջին զեկուցումը Ալիկ Պետրոսյանի կողմից Transparency International Հայաստան եւ արդեն ելույթներ եւ հարցոպատասխան. Շնորհակալություն.
Thank you very much for inviting us to those public hearings. First and foremost, I would like to praise the National Assembly for the inclusiveness of this exercise. Factions, parliamentarian factions, but also extra-parliamentarian parties, CSOs were invited over the past months to discuss and to address their comments on the political party law. And this has to be noted because this is an exercise that's not always taking place in many countries. So once again, thank you very much for that. At the International Foundation for Electoral System, with the financial support from USAID, we stand ready to support the political transformation of Armenia, and in particular to help you harmonize the legislations and building the capacity of the oversight body and also supporting political parties when the legislation will be put in place. So we have been requested by the working group to provide a desk review on the campaign finance. So what we are going to present is not different from what my colleagues have presented from ODIHR and also Professor Casalberto mentioned. It's just the angle is slightly different. We are looking at the process through the campaign finance. So we ask a colleague to present the desk review. You have it available on the table. And we have also a document that was circulated in last summer, which is our team technical electoral assessment report, available in Armenian, and we can share also this document. It has a section on political finance. So what matters when we talk about political finance from the perspective of the campaign, basically we have four major components. We have to ask four questions. Where the money is coming from, that's the source of funding. What the money is spent on, this is about the campaign expenditures and the party routine activities. And if the money collected and disbursed is reported on and disclosed. This is reporting and disclosure requirements. And finally, as we already mentioned earlier, whether there is a supervision mechanism, coupled with a sanction mechanism. So those are the four questions that we have to have in mind, and they are linked to three basic principles. Those principles are the principles of equality, and this is about the allocation of the public funding, the limitation and the prohibition, in particular the ban, what we call qualitative regulations, ban on anonymous foreign corporate donations, and quantitative regulations, the ban, the limit on the amount given to candidate and political parties. And finally, also the limitation and prohibition of campaign expenditures. Then we have what we call the principle of transparency, and this is about the reporting requirements and the disclosure regulations, and I will come back later on a series of recommendations. And finally, what we mentioned is accountability. That's the third principle, and this is about the oversight mechanism, and we already discussed which type of oversight mechanism is needed, and as Professor Casalberto mentioned, the sanctions. This is very important. So based on the analysis of the electoral code and the political party law, we came up with a series of recommendations, and I'm going very quickly through them. First, you need to guarantee the independence and strengthen the capacity of the oversight body. This oversight body can be the oversight and audit services, or can be another institution, maybe through the Commission on Preventing Corruption. You need to ensure that you are setting up an independent oversight vested with investigative and sanctioning power. This is something that we already discussed. Then there is the issue of the interdiction of the corporate donations made to the campaign, election campaign, because at the moment in your legislations, well, first you authorize those donations to political party, but there is a side door where those donations to political party can come to the campaign through the candidates. So in-kind contributions and expenses must also be estimated at their market value. That's quite important. The organizational expenditures and the social media spending and expenses incurred before the commencement of the campaign period but linked to the campaign should be also reintegrated into the campaign accounts. 6, you need to define what is lawful and what is unlawful with regard to state resources. And we used to refer to abuse of state resources during the political campaign, and that's important. At the moment, the legislation mentioned some limitation, but there is no clear definition of what is acceptable and what should not be lawful. 7, we are also recommending that the bank account for campaign account be closed within 3 months. There is no limitation. There is no indication in the current legislation at the moment. And so it's quite important that this bank account should not be used again later on for another campaign. The best practices indicate that the political parties or the candidates should have a separate account every time they are running a campaign. Another recommendation is to nominate a financial agent responsible for all financial matters related to the political campaign of a candidate of a party. Again, at the moment, there is the legislation doesn't mention this agent. The ninth recommendation that we have, all those recommendations are much more elaborated, of course, in the document that I mentioned earlier that is available. So a deadline to submit the final declaration on the contribution made at the moment to the OAS. Again, there is in the current legislation, there is no such deadline. The publication of all financial reports should be made in a more systematic fashion. And when we mention systematic fashion, it means it should be downloadable and it should be searchable and it should be really user-friendly. Why? Because this will allow civil society organizations, other political party researchers to research those analyses. And it's not about just putting on a website a PDF that is basically very difficult to treat. So it's important to have those provisions, again, in the legislation to ensure that whatever organization, and in particular watchdogs, can search and supervise also independently how the campaign, how the candidates have been spending their funds during the campaign. Finally, 2 more recommendations. The first one is a time frame from the campaign finance audit could be extended. At the moment, it is important to set up a deadline for the oversight body, the OAS at the moment, to publish the finding of its audit. And finally, I think it is really important, and that's already been mentioned by Professor Casalbertao, is to review the sanctioning system and to ensure that those sanctions are, once again, effective, proportionate, and dissuasive. So those are the recommendations that have been made by our political finance expert, and we look forward to keep on working with the working group. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Lero.